It wouldn't shock me if they vaulted into number one status on the top 25.
He's got a chance to be in that 1-1 conversation going forward.
Yeah, we've got some moving and some shaking in week 2. It's still very early, but there's still directionally some movements on the board, some early feedback coming in from scouts, some loud performances. So we've got plenty to talk about today. Probably we'll focus mostly on top of the board players this week. On the website, I wrote about most of our top college pitchers after 2 weeks. Me and Ben have talked about this in the past. We probably talked about it as well, Peter, but maybe we even mentioned it last week. But just feel like you can get earlier takeaways from pitchers. You need fewer games to get a good read on like how they've changed, if they've changed, and then their performance is a lot less reliant on the competition and the sample size. You can just kind of see what the stuff is coming out of their hand and have a decent understanding of what's going on. So there are 4 pretty in-depth scouting reports on each of the 4 pitchers we have in the first round on the site, in addition to some quicker notes on all of our top 100 arms, plus Patrick Forbes, who will be a top 100 arm on our next update pretty confidently. But yeah, I guess I'll just throw it to you, Peter. Are there any pitchers who have really stood out to you at this point? I mean, we've got Jamie Arnold and Tyler Bremner as like kind of the clear top 2 guys. Do you view it the same today? And are there any guys who are like jumping into first round range, or that you would expect maybe to jump into first round range based on what they've shown in the first few weeks?
So coming into the year, we had long pegged Arnold and Bremner as kind of 1A and 1B, no matter how you slice it, for the top college pitchers in the class. And I think at least at this point, through 2 weeks of the season, it's becoming a little bit more clear, at least for me, that Arnold is the number 1 guy, and then it's Bremner in the 2 spot. I mean, he's been as good as you can get through 2 starts. He hasn't allowed an earned run. He's allowed 3 hits, 16 Ks and no walks. He's seen a jump and stuff. I think that, there was chatter in the fall, and we saw it on video, and, about his changeup and the progression and the leaps that it took. And I think that it's real. I mean, right now you're looking at a left-handed starter who attacks hitters from a low 3/4, really uncomfortable slot, that has a mid-90s fastball that jumps out of his hand with life through the zone. The slider has long been his trademark pitch. He manipulates its shape well. It's long, it's sharp, and then the changeup has been kind of a revelation. It's really flashed in the first couple of weekends. So he's kind of
Yeah.
right now not only SP1, but I think he's got at least right now, and we'll talk about it more throughout the pod, but I mean, he's got a chance at least, to be in that 1-1 conversation going forward.
Yeah, we're kind of having some early conversations about the next draft update. Who's going to rank number 1? I think it's a fairly wide open race at this point, but on the college side, I'm not sure if there's a player who has made like a 1-1 case better than Arnold so far. And again, like it's very early, it's 2 weeks. Don't want to overreact too much, but I would tend to agree with you. I mean, he's basically been as good as you can expect someone to be. You mentioned the changeup. That was an area coming into this spring that a lot of scouts were just kind of curious to see him show that pitch more frequently. In 24, he used the pitch 4% of the time, almost exclusively versus righties. That usage rate overall is up 10%. It's a 15% usage rate versus righties this year. In terms of its movement profile, I think it's got a chance to be a plus pitch. Like it's got a ton of arm side fading life. It's got a ton of tumble. It moves a lot, like to the point where Arnold himself even told, I'm not sure if it was specifically to us, but Jacob wrote about how, like he had mentioned, he struggles to control it because the movement profile is so extreme. So he's not landing it in the zone as frequently as the fastball and slider, but just the flashes of that pitch that he's shown, I think have to be pretty encouraging. This is a guy who's shown strong command in the past. I would expect that's a pitch that as he continues to use it more frequently, he'll get some better feel for it. And if he's throwing his fastball and slider for strikes 70% of the time, it's not like he needs to have the changeup be in the zone that frequently. But yeah, down the stretch, it'll be interesting to see how he develops feel for that pitch. And at this point, I think Arnold is kind of above everyone else in the college class.
Yeah, I mean, it's a left-handed starter with front of the rotation upside. It's strikes, it's stuff. I think you could very easily argue 3+ pitches at this point, especially with his fastball and slider. it's getting increasingly more difficult to, I'd say, pick out warts in his game. And I
He
think
looks
the other
odd.
guy that,
That's like the one word I have. It just is a weird look, but I think
yeah,
that plays to his benefit.
yeah, the arm stroke is a little weird and long and funky, but like you said, it does play in his favor. It's a real difficult look for opposing hitters. And he's just been outstanding. I think the other guy that we'd be remiss not to talk about is Liam Doyle from Tennessee.
Oh my gosh.
I mean, he's
He's
just
been
been
insane. So he's
stupid.
first
It
two starts, he had 11 strikeouts versus Hofstra in 5 innings, week 1, and then he followed that up with 14 strikeouts versus Sanford in week 2. He's sitting 95 and he has a 40.9% swinging strike rate, not a miss rate. If that was 40% of the swings against his fastball or misses, that would be insane. LP Langevin from a year ago had a 46% miss rate. He has a 40.9% swinging strike rate. So every pit, four out of 10 fastballs he's throwing are getting whiffs. It's truly insane. Yeah, he's been dominant. I didn't mean to cut you off, but go ahead, Peter. Break it down more.
No, you
It's been
summed it up
wild.
perfectly. It's particularly the fastball um, characteristics and results that have stood out to me, like you said. And I mean, it's a 72% miss rate, which is just nutty. It's sitting in the mid 90s, been up to 99 with tons of life through the zone. Um, I know I drafted it as like my, I guess, quote unquote, fastball in this year's draft. So far, so good on that front. But
Who did I take? AJ Russell?
yeah, well, and we'll get into him, which is,
Who
yeah,
also came back this week. The like I think I one of my rare tweets these days I'd mentioned something like it's going to be impossible to barrel up Tennessee fastballs with between Doyle and AJ Russell, who probably entered the year with like the consensus top fastball. And if you wanted to say Doyle, like it's just silly numbers. So
nuts. And then you throw in guys like Nate Snead, who's also in the mid to upper 90s, Marcus Phillips, who's got a big time arm. It's a really formidable group there down in Knoxville. But with Doyle, it's an interesting look because the numbers are exceptional. Um, the data is equally as impressive. You know, you cite the fastball miss rate, that like shorter, sharper slider has also been effective. Um, but it's a real efforty delivery. He falls off towards the third base side. Um, it's again, it's a very high effort look and a strenuous look. So I'm kind of, at least for me, I'm not totally sold on his ability to start
mhm,
professionally, which isn't necessarily a huge knock on him. But I'd say that's the one key thing that's holding me back and probably a lot of others back from
mhm,
penciling him in as this slam dunk first round guy. But I mean, if he keeps this rate is going to be impossible to sustain.
mhm.
But I mean, if he keeps throwing the ball this well, or even half as well as he has through SEC play, you're
Yeah.
talking about a Friday night left-handed starter in the SEC with an abundance of success. That profile, regardless of the reliever risk, is not going to last long. So I mean,
Yeah, I'm really intrigued to see like what the Arsenal is looking like once he faces like I don't want to knock too much on the early competition, but I mean he hasn't faced the best competition he's going to face this year. Uh, He's using his fastball 76% of the time, the changeup and then slider cutter between the three of them. It's like a 24% usage there. I'm curious to see how the secondaries develop and what scouts are thinking of those pitches moving forward because I would want to give this guy every opportunity to start at the next level because his fastball is just so unique and is such a bat misser. But I guess two things, just like what sort of miss rate are we going to settle into once we get further into the season? Because again, unless you can think of another pitcher, LP Langevin's fastball from a year ago is like the biggest fastball miss rate I can remember since we've had access to this sort of data. 46% is like an insane rate. We were talking about this in the Slack, but once in college baseball, at least once pitchers get north of like a 30% miss rate, I kind of open my eyes a little bit and say, oh, this is a real bat missing fastball. Like 40% is just insane, kind of elite. Like I could probably count on one hand the amount of fastballs that I can remember at least in that range. Like I don't even think Jack Leiter, his fastball at the time was probably like a 35% miss rate. I might pull that up as you're talking to see what his was at the time, but it's just insane right now. It's only 2 games, but I mean he's gotten 43 misses on 105 fastballs that he's thrown. It's truly ludicrous.
Yeah, it's obscene. And I think even when all is said and done, let's say he settles in and we're sitting here in May or June when the season's about ended and he's in that like 35 to 40-ish range, which is even still ridiculous, or even if he's like 32 to 33% plus, you're still talking about a fastball, especially from a starting pitcher that's in the upper echelon of miss rates. And I think people are going to feel rather similarly about it then as they do now, barring something different or the stuff backing up. But um, yeah, I mean, when you're gonna whoever ends up drafting him, he's gonna get every chance to start. Like he'll pitch his way into the bullpen if that's
Mhm.
how the
And
chips end up falling.
what's also stood out to me is like his fastball location. If you just look at his pitch plot, it's everything is at the top of the zone. Like he's throwing the pitch for strikes at a high rate. A lot of that is because he's getting a lot of chases above the zone, but he's throwing the pitch exactly where you would want it to be thrown, I would imagine, just given its shape. But I just pulled up Jack Leiter's college, so this is his college data from 2021. He had a 32% miss rate on his fastball, just for some context. And like we were talking about that pitch as like an elite fastball, SIG 94 with great ride. I think Leiter was probably the sort of poster boy for like vertical approach angle and induced vertical break at the time. I think he was like one of the first college pitchers that had really been broken down in that lens. So there's definitely a lot of talk about that pitch, but Liam Doyle's is like a whole different universe right now. But again, that's like a full season's worth of data. We're 2 weeks in, but it's just a silly pitch.
Yeah, he's done a good job of commanding it. Everything's been for the most part in the top half of the zone, isolating it even further, more so in the top third of the zone. But like he can cut it, he can ride it. It's just really impressive. What he's done so far for more reasons than just the miss rate. It's kind of how he's
Mhm.
doing it as well. But I wish the delivery was a little more aesthetically pleasing, but
Yep.
you know, what can you do? I think the other arm, and I think sticking on Tennessee, like AJ Russell coming back was a huge development. Obviously, it was
Mhm.
before the season, the expectation was, second half of the season, probably in the later portion of SEC play and ramp him up to the point where you're able to use him for a stretched out amount of time come regionals. But him coming back on Tuesday was like breaking news and
Mhm.
for everyone. Like they kept that one super under wraps. No one saw that coming. Um, threw just 17 pitches, but struck out the side pretty easily. His body looked better to me when I was watching him, like a little bit more filled out, especially in his lower half, really under
Mhm.
control and effortless delivery, trademark low launch attack angle. But fastball was up to 97 on the stadium gun with its signature ride
Mhm.
and run through the zone. And then he paired it uh, with his slider that flashed 2 plane tilt with some sharpness. But the fastball with Russell has long been the calling card. Like that pitch
Mhm.
alone is gonna have him drafted in a pretty good spot, I'd say. So
Yeah,
um,
sitting 95, touching 97, like it's hard to ask him to do much more than he did in the limited time he got. Like you said, faced three batters, struck all three out, threw strikes with the fastball. So I'm excited to see how he gets stretched out, what sort of a role he's going to find on this Tennessee squad because they have an embarrassment of riches both in the lineup and on the pitching staff. It wouldn't shock me if they vaulted into number one status on the top 25 in the near future, depending on like what them and what A&M and LSU are doing. Like they've been extremely impressive on both sides of the ball. So it's not anything crazy or new to say that all these players at Tennessee are going to get scouted pretty heavily. It's kind of the norm for that program. But yeah, it's good to see him back. And like you said, we did not expect him to come back this early. When I heard that he was pitching, I was like a bit stunned, but also really excited because early season college baseball, early season spring training feels more like the news. When you hear about any news for injuries, it's bad news. So a nice positive sign early for Russell and for Tennessee.
yeah, and he has more of that like traditional starter look. He's this strapping, high waisted 6'6", like 217-pound kid. I believe he's listed at on Tennessee's website. Easy delivery. Fastball is probably closer to a 7 than it is a 6. Sliders, you could argue an above average grade on it. The key's going to be developing the third pitch, but he does a great job of competing around the zone. Very under control. There's a lot to like with Russell, and at least just listening to Coach Vitello talk, it sounds like the off the field makeup is really impressive as well. So um, a cherry on top to a
Hmm.
to an already impressive profile. I have to imagine they'll be very cautious with him. Like I think his next appearance or two or three will look similar to
Hmm.
Tuesdays before he gets really stretched out. There's just no need to rush it at all. But
Yeah.
um, I think he'll be being he'll start getting stretched out way before we all initially thought.
And I think this is fantastic news for him. Obviously, just being on the mound and being healthy, but he's a guy who really didn't have a ton of track record entering the year. He didn't have a ton of track record as a starter. He started one game in 2023. Um, Otherwise, it was 23 outings out of the pen, just 30 innings, 30.1 specifically. Then 2024, he had four starts, six appearances, 14.1 innings before he got hurt. So he really does not have an extended track record as a starter at all, and just showing that he's able to do that and getting more, um, just getting more of a resume in that capacity. Like you said, he looks the part. He's got the frame. The delivery's pretty easy, but just showing it in the SEC is going to be really important. And now he's got a lot longer of a runway to actually develop that than what was expected. So that's great news.
Yeah. And then there are a
Let's touch on
handful of
Bremner
guys.
really quickly
Yeah.
and kind of go in the opposite direction. Just go back up the board. How concerned are you at this point for Tyler Bremner? Because it has been a rockier start to the season for him than for Arnold and obviously for a guy like Liam Doyle. He's made both of his first two starts, three innings, his week one start, and then he was pulled as a precaution for some tightness that he felt in cold weather. Came back out next week, three more innings. I think from a stuff perspective, Bremner has looked just fine to me. I mean, he's sitting with the same velocity he showed a year ago. He's sitting in the mid 90s. The power to the pitch is there. The changeup looks like it's typical elite self. Both the changeup and the slider have actually been really impressive bat missers. It's been the fastball that's kind of gotten hit around. In his second game, he allowed five hits, a pair of home runs. Four of the hits he gave up were fastballs that kind of started on the glove side, third of the plate, and then ran back over the heart of the zone and got hit hard. I know we were just hearing about Bremner prior to this season. There was some concern that like his fastball can be hittable at times. We've seen that early, but I mean he's throwing hard, he's throwing strikes. The changeup is missing a lot of bats. He's showing confidence in that pitch and almost pitches off the changeup at times, which I don't necessarily mind because the changeup is just that good and he's able to land it at will. The slider is flash plus. That was maybe his most inconsistent pitch entering the year. Um, I thought that looked really good, especially in his second game. Would just like to see him start pitching a little bit further into games and really be confident that that forearm tightness doesn't turn into anything serious because you do get a little bit scared every time you hear about forearm tightness. But where are you at with Bremner?
Yeah, hearing about the forearm tightness gave me the bad shivers a little bit, but I think with him he's also a victim of how well Jamie Arnold's throwing. I think it's easy to exacerbate, a couple of meh outings, especially when the guy that you've been going toe to toe with and have been talked about toe to toe with has been near perfect through two starts. But I'm not super worried, at least to this point. Obviously, the forearm tightness is going to be something to watch going forward and just seeing how he looks as the season progresses. But it's kind of clear the smoke and scuttlebutt on him is to hunt the fastball, particularly early in counts, and see if you can ambush it. I think five of the hits he's given up, three have come in either within the first three pitches of the at bat,
Hmm.
uh, or in a plus plus count. And then, like you said, and you wrote and pointed out, it comes with the fastball running back over the heart of the plate. So, I mean, if it
Yep.
starts into lefties, it'll run back over kind of the middle half, middle third. And then to righties, if it starts out, it'll kind of run back over the middle as well, and
Hmm.
they'll put a barrel to it. So I think commanding the fastball a little bit better will warrant more positive results. But the changeup's been excellent. The sliders also flashed.
Hmm.
Um, and one of the homers was simply, a hit or beat you. I mean,
Yeah, I thought the
that
second home
happens.
run he allowed in week two was a really well located pitch. Like it was down and in. I thought it was just a nice swing. The first one he gave up definitely ran back over the heart of the plate. Maybe it's not the sort of execution you want, but I'm kind of with you. I'm not too concerned as long as the health checks out. I think that Bremner has this sort of secondaries and command to be able to mix and match enough to keep hitters honest on the fastball because it's not like he's throwing a soft fastball. It's a 95-mile-per-hour pitch on average. It does have a lot of movement, and I think it maybe is just a case of being a little bit more precise with it or just pitching backwards more frequently, which he can do. I wonder if teams will want to maybe try and tweak the shape of that pitch at the next level, if that's something that will be considered, because there is a lot of noise in the data we have on Bremner's fastball. I don't think he gets as much riding life, particularly that we have on the spreadsheet. But either way, I think there's plenty to work with here, and he's got the ability to do enough with the changeup and the slider to keep hitters honest. So I'm still pretty excited for the total package with Bremner.
Yeah, 100%. As long as the health is, as you said, as long as that checks out and he's 100% fine, especially in his throwing arm, then so be it. Right now, he's got 3+ pitches. I mean, you could, yeah. I mean, I think the fastball, you could argue, depending on the day, you could say 55 or a 6, but I still got it
Mhm.
as a 6. The changeup is
Yeah.
one of the best of its kind, and then the slider is also a plus pitch. So I mean, the
And
clay and the
last year, I
st-
think, if I remember correctly, the fastball and changeup were his most effective pitches, and the slider was the pitch that got hit around a little bit and was a bit more inconsistent. So I think he's probably, and maybe this wasn't even the case last year, but there were a few outings where the fastball just got hit around and he made the adjustments, and overall, it was a really effective pitch. So um, I'm pretty bullish on him, I'd say, compared, if people are freaking out about Bremner, I think there's a lot to look at in a positive lens. Like he looks like the same guy to me so far in the limited stints we've seen him that he did a year ago from a stuff perspective.
yeah, and to your point about the slider, the jumps that it's taken year over year since arriving on campus have been really impressive. Even between his freshman and sophomore year, and then sophomore spring to this summer, um, it's looked more and more like a bona fide plus swing and miss pitch. So I'm with you. You could clean up the fastball a little bit, but I think it's more so like Arnold is rather clearly SP1 now, and it's like Arnold in the field as opposed to this 1A and 1B. But we're 2 starts in, and then I guess the last arm that I wanted to touch on was to just reiterate Patrick Forbes
Hmm.
and how impressive he's been to start the year through 2 starts. He's allowed 2 earned runs through 10 innings, 20 Ks to just 1 walk. He's I love the body. I mean, he's this physical, athletic kid at 6'3", 220. There's an appealing degree of explosiveness in his delivery. Fastball has been into the mid to upper 90s with a ton of life in the top half of the zone. And then the slider has also flashed plus with this sharp 2-plane break and impressive finish. So he's primarily a 2-pitch guy right now. You're going to have to develop a third, but the clay is there. Like, he's a low mileage arm. Like, he started pitching full time just last year. And this will be his first year that he spends entirely in the rotation. So I mean, he's a good athlete. He's got stuff. He competes around the zone. There's just a lot to like. I mean, if he's an arm that I can pluck with my second or even early third pick in the draft, I highly doubt he'll be there for
Yeah.
teams' third picks in the
Third
draft.
pick
But
seems unlikely at this stage, unless you're like the Orioles or someone else who's got a lot of extra picks. Maybe the Royals' third pick.
yeah, I mean, if I can get him with my second pick in the draft, I'd be thrilled. So he's obviously going to go out and do it in ACC play, but just a really impressive 2+ pitch combo, at least so
Mhm.
far.